everyone. My name is Yuji Yamada. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, all around the world. So it's right noon in Tokyo. I'm located in Tokyo, Japan. And today I'll just share whatever I've seen here in Japan about the next way of work or organizing. I think the topics everyone here is interested. And I'll just share some recent progress I went through throughout my personal journey about how to handle cultural differences. This has been a topic for me for like 5, 7, 8 years now. I'm still working on it. I don't have any answers, but I'm really having more interest. What should be a good contribution from my standpoint in Japan to the world? So very open to hear any comments, questions, or I don't know, disagreements maybe, to hear whatever could make good progress about this topic. So I'll just share my slide for about then 25 minutes or so. I would like to share whatever I have here with me, and then hear any comments that would be more, would put this question more into better discussion. Well, then first I'll go through my brief self-introduction, and then how I go through how I went to approach this topic, the new ways of work beyond cultural differences. And in short, I went through this topic throughout cases here in Japan, interviewing a lot of companies. And then after my recent 2-3 months progress within interviewing a lot of companies, I'll just give my tentative conclusion. Recently, I just see these topics, but this is not my complete answer. I'm just working on it, just to share what I've seen here in this recent progress. And first, briefly speaking, in my professional career, I've been to 3 different areas. First, I was on the right side, right down corner. I was working as a consultant in the learning and development area in large companies in Japan. That was about 5-6 years in Japan. So I worked with the traditional big companies at first. And then I switched my career to be a co-founder and CEO at a startup company. So I was in charge of managing and organizing the whole company for 5 years, up to like 35, 40 members. And then after I resigned from that role, I started exploring what could be new ways of organizing. So I wanted to know more. What could be a good step? What could be the possible next ways that could be the better way to organize? And last 2 years ago, I started a new company, R3S JP. In Japanese, it's Deisansha, but I know it's very hard to pronounce that, so I just put an English name, R3S JP. And the purpose of this is so I'm here in Japan, but I really understand there's a lot of wisdom, knowledge, practices out in the world. So what I'm trying to do is to do both sides. One is to bring in the knowledge or wisdom that is outside of Japan into Japan. And then the other way, what I learn, know here in Japan could be, and find out what I could share out to the world. And of course, create new knowledge, wisdom that would put humanity into more progress about new ways of work. So I'm working on this in and create and out in 3 ways within the standpoint of Japan. And some of the projects I've done, one of them would be this book. My good friend Tom Nixon wrote a book about the source principles, originated by Peter Koenig. And we translated Tom's book into Japanese and published this book last October, so about half a year ago. It's making good progress to share the knowledge or wisdom of Peter Koenig and Tom's into Japan. So this is one way we work to share whatever could be interesting or inspiring in the Japanese community. And another progress I've done, maybe some of you may know, Corporate Rebels. I was introduced to these 2 guys, Yust and Pim, from the author Tom Nixon, my good friend. And I was very inspired of the way they approach this new way of work. In their words, making work more fun. What they've done is, since they founded this website, Corporate Rebels, in 2016, they went to visit progressive organizations all around the world. Maybe like Beardsdorf, they're in Netherlands. So in Netherlands, Beardsdorf, or Morningstar, or Patagonia or Semco or whatever that's very progressive in the world. And when they came, these two guys came to Japan last October, and I was honoring to host some visits to Japanese companies with them, and I will share some of the stories today. And I was really inspired at how they approach throughout real cases, actual activities. So I just followed what they did in the world here in Japan to go and know more what could be progressive or what could be the possibility I can learn from actual practices here in Japan. So today about this topic, new ways of work beyond cultural differences. So I like to approach in the same way. I've visited a lot of companies recently in this 2-3 months, and this would be the logos, and some are being planned, but recently I visited like close to 20 companies and wrote blog posts in Japanese, and some are translated into English and published into Corporate Rebels websites. So if you're interested, please go to their website and you can find these companies' real stories. And for today, just visiting these kind of 20-25 companies, I'd like to approach to this topic. How should we think about these cultural differences throughout the visits I went through? And just to share, and as today's storytelling, I just made a very rough, framework or model or whatever, just a very tentative one to share whatever I've seen here in Japan. And this model, just briefly explaining this, first about the theory, this is not something like universal systematic knowledge. I think this is more like academic research done by professors and so on. I really respect this work, but I'm more like a practitioner, so this is not my specialty. I do respect the theories. And then next would be some kind of models, abstract concepts of the overall organizational design. And please don't ask me about the difference between theory and model. I don't know, but just a very rough understanding that a holistic way to capture the organization, I would call this a model. And maybe the work of Frederic Laloux might be something of a model, more than not more than a theory, but more a model, but something of an abstract concept here. And then next comes the practice. So individual systems, initiatives, actions, that whatever people put into practice to manage the organization. This could be something about a hiring. This could be a competency system, or learning and development and so on. So there's a lot of practices that people put into work on to organize their companies. And then comes the reality. So whatever happens in reality, it's everything here. And the reason why I created this framework is that there are circumstances that are around the organization, all kinds of environments surrounding the organization. So this could maybe include business practices. This could maybe include the markets or the competitors or the labor market or whatever. And in this context, I would like to put the culture here in these circumstances. So when I say culture here, I'm talking about the Japanese culture or something, not talking about the organizational culture, but something that outside as a circumstance from the organizational standpoint. So this in the horizontal way. And also I would mention about the philosophy of the organization in some companies. So this is something that underlies in the organization, the fundamental philosophy the organization or the founder has. And in reality, when practitioners does any kind of organizing, they mainly affect the models or the practices that is put into practice. So there should be some kind of philosophy here. So this would be a rough framework. And then I'll just share a lot of cases I've seen here in Japan to just share what I feel throughout the topic about the cultural differences. The first example would be these two companies, Centigo and Corporate Directions Inc., CDI. On the left, this is a Swedish management consulting firm, about 300 members. CDI is a Japanese management consulting firm, about 60 members. The reason why I put this first is because the guys, corporate rebels, Yuste and Pin, when they came to Japan, I arranged a meeting with the executive, with CDI, and what they felt, Yuste and Pin felt about CDI was that their practice, the way they organize their team is very similar to Centigo in Sweden. And of course, they didn't know each other, but they were very similar. And what they was so inspired that was similar was that how they distribute work and define the compensation in the organization. Roughly speaking, it's a marketplace. When a client asks a project to these companies, all the consultants in the organizations are in the market, so they can negotiate which projects they want to go in and which fee they would have. But they have the same model. And that's the reason why is that they want very participatory or flat or democratic way of organizing. And having the same management consulting area, they have a very similar practice, even though maybe the circumstances is very different. Well, it became the same. So that was very inspiring for me to know that maybe you don't need to think about the circumstances very much. Well, maybe you just need to face the reality and just do whatever you want to make good progress in their business. This was the first starting point about comparing a lot of companies. And then maybe a next one. These two are from Japan, Relations and Carabina. These two companies, in short, they adopt holacracy. I think most of you may know about holacracy. This is a very sophisticated way to organize work in the organization. Relations is a company about 30 members. They do various topics of consulting. On the other hand, Carabina is a 100-member software development company. So they have different business models, different ways of specialties. But still, since they adopt the same model of holacracy, they have a lot in common about how they put work into practice. Of course, in the organizational culture or the philosophy, they have differences. But when you talk about the model, and in some part the practices, they're very similar when they have the same rule of holacracy put into place. And maybe a different one. These are two law firms. On the left, BVDB, I don't know how to pronounce this, but they're from Netherlands. I saw this in Corporate Rebels website. I heard some from Houston Pim too. There's about 20 members in Netherlands. And on the right, Awazawa Yamamoto Law Office. These two are the names of the partners. There are about 10 members in Japan. And the similarity is that they both have very participatory, flat, transparent, democratic way of organizing. But I don't know very well about this Netherlands firm, but about this Japanese firm, I heard a lot about this. And what was so typical about them is that the circumstances, because maybe if you hear that there's only 10 members and they do a very participatory, flat, autonomous organization, you might think it's rather easy to do it in a small team, like in 2 pizzas. But the circumstances here is that the Japanese industry of lawyers is as an industry, a very hierarchical circumstances. Because all the lawyers who has a license in Japan knows which year they got the license. And this makes a very rigid step in which year you are licensed. So that is in the industry, not about the individual firm. But this law office didn't like that. So they wanted to have a very flat, participatory, individual autonomous organization. So having the circumstances very different, very hierarchical, traditional, still they are trying to have a very participatory organization. So this distance between the background and their model and the practices was very inspiring to hear, even though they only have a very small team. So this was the very good case that I do recognize the importance to see well about the circumstances. And maybe the last two. And these two are different Japanese companies. But to these two companies, they have a very unique model. For Yumemi, this is a 300-member software development company in Japan. they have a very agile way of development. And also not only to the development, but they put that into practice in all the way they organize the whole team. And the most critical point they are waiting on is to distribute the role of managers, project managers, to the team, not having an individual manager, but sharing all the roles in the team. They are intending to do this because they want the team to be able to scale up to 1,000 people. So they're heavily weighting to distributing the model inside their company. And on the other hand, Gaiax is a different internet service company in Japan. And the model they have is very unique, is that they name themselves as a startup studio. And what they mean by this is that they say they have both functions of a business company and an investment company. So what they mean by this is that they let their members to carve out the existing business outside, holding the up to half of the ownership of the new company. So if you are a member of Gaiax, you can carve out whatever business you are doing inside Gaiax and be an owner, at the max half of the owner of your company. So they are very supporting the members to be an entrepreneur by themselves. So that's why they say themselves both has a business company and also a investment company. So that's a very unique model they have. And this is coming from their philosophy, because that they want their members to be very, very autonomous and be self-driven in their own career. So this is also a model that came out, nothing to do with the circumstances or whatever that's surrounding here in Japan. And last, some cases I see very common based on the philosophy. 3 companies, they are all here in Japan. One would be Corporate Directions, CDI, the management consulting firm I introduced first. Next will be Sonic Garden. These are a software developed company here in Japan. They have about 50 members. And the last will be Anagramu. There are 100 members in their team. They're very strong at marketing. So they have different specialties. But the fundamental philosophy they have in common is that they don't organize their company as an organization, but more like a community or maybe a guild of professionals. Because what they all have in common is that CDI want their members to be a professional consultant, and Sonic Garden, they want their members to be a professional engineer, and Anagram, a professional marketer. So what they're trying to do is to support all the members to be professionals within their own organizations as an individual. So even though they are working on different business areas, the fundamental philosophy is very close. And they in one way, they don't care so much about the organization. It's only a field or a community or guild where professionals gathers. So though they are in different areas, they have very close way to put into practice. So this also comes from something not from the circumstances, but from the philosophy. So I went through, I don't know, 8 cases I've seen here in Japan. I think I can go more, but first about the tentative conclusion. So my question, new ways of work beyond cultural differences. And this has been a topic for me since 2017, because when I went to learn more about the progressive way of organizing outside of Japan, sometimes I felt some things might be different. So maybe there's something we can't just adopt or introduce directly but there might be something we could learn more. So the tentative conclusion for today, how should we think about cultural differences? And just to say that this is only from a practitioner's viewpoint. I'm not a professor. I'm just trying to see more practitioner in the world. And first, don't think too much about the culture. So this is my first conclusion. You don't need to handle topics like Japanese culture when you are facing the reality of an individual organization. As I introduced, much of the companies here in Japan doesn't think about what is the Japanese culture or so on. What they are facing is facing their reality and having their own philosophy and having their own, creating their own model. They're trying to get better, get their organization better, or make the members more happy or more enjoyable or more progressive, productive. But that's not the point. The culture isn't the point. But the second point is that you need to capture the whole picture, understanding deeply about different aspects of the organization. And in this, today, I just made a rough framework about model, practice, reality, and circumstances. And if, when you think the culture included in the circumstances, it makes a difference for your organization in your reality, then you need to take a good look in the culture. But oftentimes this wouldn't be a very critical topic. And for last, maintain coherence between all these different aspects. So when you think deeply about the culture, when you have the need to look deeply into the culture, if you recognize some importance, then you need to think about what is affecting the reality or what model should be modified. But it's only when maintaining coherence, when I'm talking about maintaining the coherence, if the culture isn't so much important as a practitioner, well, just handle it not so deeply. And this is, as I first mentioned, it's only from a practitioner's viewpoint. I'm not talking about professionals or theories. And if when we are facing a reality in your team or supporting someone who has their own team, it's more to think about the reality or their philosophy. What are they up to? What do they want to see in the world throughout their initiatives? It's more to go deeper into their philosophy, their model, their practices, and then, if needed, just go see whatever cultural differences you need to face. So, just went through roughly throughout my presentation. So this is only a tentative conclusion for now. I'm very open to hear whatever agreements, comments, or disagreements, and from different backgrounds too. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Yuji. And one clarifying point, right, is that when you're talking about culture and don't care so much for it, you're speaking about the national culture in this instance, right? Not necessarily the organizational culture.
Exactly. Thank you.
Right.
Yes. When I talk about cultural differences today, I'm talking about the national culture or the regional culture or something like that. And just to add, this has been a topic for me here in Japan because we learn a lot from the outside, from the English text. And oftentimes people get stuck in the difference between the culture. There might be something different in the culture. We are a very, I don't know, collective kind of culture and so on. I think that's very true, but maybe you don't need to wait heavily if you're a practitioner and trying to make your organization better.
Thank you, Yuji. And I mean, for me, honestly, and we had this conversation yesterday, right? I mean, I've worked and lived on 4 different continents in 9 different countries. So I've experienced a bit of cultural diversity and how it influences. And I love that lens which you bring in of looking at the similarities versus, the differences. I think in our modern world, we're so hung up on, looking at the differences that we as societies have, and I think life could be a lot more fun if we actually seek the similarities. And so I'm super curious to hear a little bit more on your quest when you've gone out and discovered these different companies. How did you approach the companies? What was your basic point into the companies, and how did they agree on sitting down with you?
Well, thank you. First of all, it's my journey have just started. Many of them are my friends or people I know introduced me to their companies. So it's more like my personal network is the first starting point. And still, I went to interview a lot of companies who have, as far as I know, have a very original way of organizing or has their philosophy in their companies. So that was the starting point for going to these 25 companies. And I'm planning to go to 100 as maybe this year, I don't know. And not very many traditional big companies are included here recently.
Yeah.
I think this is something different. I think the majority is the founder is still the CEO, and the person's his or her philosophy is very realized in the organization. But I know succession is a very important topic when you talk about companies. So this will be a next topic.
Right. Interesting. Oh, I'm looking forward to hearing about that topic. In the meantime, and I know you will love this question from a practitioner lens, Yuji. So there's a comment around culture being quite blurry terminology at times. Now, this is asking for a definition of culture. And let's not go necessarily for the academic definition, but Yuji, for you, how did you frame it when you went out to discover?
Okay, when I talk about in this rough framework and culture included in this, maybe the circumstances box, my personal journey about this started in 2018 when I first went to participate in a workshop at, I think it was Greece, to go and see people who are interested in the progressive way of organizing. And I went to talk there about the progressive way of organizations. And what I felt was that in Japan, as my personal sense or feeling, is that we are pretty, in both good and bad ways, good at collaborating or being participatory. And sometimes that makes, historically, sometimes that how do you say, press the person to not express themselves, follow more to the culture or the organizational culture or the norm. But on the other hand, that made a very good progressive way to both having his or her own passion and also aligning that directly with the organization. That was very natural. And it was very hard for me to explain this sense. And I felt that in some parts. Sometimes I did it, of course, but it was hard for me to explain that. Maybe it was because I didn't have enough languages to express that, what I felt. But that very subtle differences, I thought might underlies in something that is in our unconscious or the collective unconscious area. And I really wanted to know what was the difference, maybe in the unconscious area. So it might come from the Japanese language. It might come from the Japanese business rituals. Might come from the traditional culture. I don't know, but something that is unconscious that we could work on. So that's the area I wanted to approach. Not a definition, but something I felt.
Mm. Which is interesting. So there's a comment here around, the education and school system and the culture it creates, and how that might influence. And I love how you said the collective unconscious, cultural elements that unite the Japanese culture and norms. How much, when you went into these organizations, how much did you feel that the CEOs were breaking out of the norms of the work environment in Japan by adopting more progressive philosophies, practices, models?
It depends, but recently these 2025 companies are pretty much the innovative area of this bell curve. So they're pretty much stepping further from the standard norm. I think they have their pretty much a strong philosophy, and still in these companies, I think there's like up to 400, 500 members at some companies. So if you have a couple of hundred employees, members working with you, they are pretty much people who are in the majority. They're not all innovators. So they're facing their tendency in a very traditional Japanese way of working happens when the company gets bigger. So the founders and the leaders are very outliers, or the innovators who are trying to work on the progressive ways, but trying to attach that shift to the big team. I think that's the reality that's happening in big companies here, rather big companies here.
Thank you. And by the way, Yuji, if it's okay with you, I would actually open the floor up, because I can see some people are now dropping comments in the chat. And there's one comment particular which attracted me, and that's Christian, because I'm not so sure at which point in the presentation you asked this question, but I think that context might be quite relevant. So Christian, you said that is awesome. Do many members take advantage of this opportunity? Which opportunity were you referring to?
So I was referring to when they were saying that they could own 50% of a company that they would start.
We're talking about kayaks. Yeah. This company.
Yeah. So this company. So how many spin-offs are coming out of this one?
There's, I think they had like two companies have already spun out and become public, so they are very successful ones. And there's a kind of a variation between becoming totally independent, carving out, and getting different venture capitals to invest to their companies. There's some are still in their group. Only the minority are held by the founders, and the majority is held by kayaks. But I think roughly like 10 or 15, or I think it's been 5, it was 2014, so like 6 or 7 years they've been working on this, and only having 150 members in the team, but they have like 10 or 15 spinning out. Or some alumni become founders and then ask for investment from kayaks, coming back as an alumni. So including those situations, like 10 or 15, has been the recent progress.
Interesting.
It's a very unique, and they are a public company, so they need to face the shareholders market. So it's very, very unique way of organizing.
That is quite interesting. Very often, what we see, and then that might be another question to look into, is that a lot of the very progressive, forward-leaning organizations are privately owned because it's easier at times to experiment if you do not have the shareholder pressure, right? That being said, there was an interesting question around what do we even define as progressive ways of working?
Very good question.
Yuji, over to you. I don't know, or over to the group. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I really love to share whatever from the group, but for my tentative answer, I don't have any definition for the progressive. And how I select these company is based on their more like the philosophy or their own way of thinking about the organization. So not about the practice or the model, not how, but why or what they want to achieve throughout the organization. So I'm sticking on the philosophy side to go and find progressive organizations. That's my tentative answer.
It's interesting. The more I read, the more I experience, the more I go back to the why question as well. And then there is quite a long question, which I'm trying to digest, but maybe rather than me trying to digest, Lawrence, do you want to ask a question directly?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. I just was fascinated about the work Yuji has done and shared with us. And I'm curious about some common phenomenon, if there's anything emerging from that. As we can see, companies that are not known to each other, but they can end up in the same model sometimes and in the same practice. And how is that happening? What is the reason according to your research? Is it because they read the book? For example, some company, they read Reinventing Organizations and they try to do something to the organization? Or is it happening very naturally that they are just end up in doing so? It may be something of the time now for human being. And I'm curious about that. Thank you.
Well, thank you. That is really my question too. And my recent observation is that they end up to become very original in the way of organizing because they have a very different philosophy or the way they want to think to realize in the world. And that philosophy ends up not only in organizations, but oftentimes in the business models and the way they maybe manage the financial part and whatever. But since they have the philosophy, they end up becoming a very unique way of organizing. I think that's what I observed recently from these companies. So oftentimes, the business model is somewhat very different from the traditional or the standard way in the Japanese market. So I really feel that the combination between not only talking about the organization or the people, but how to manage the whole entity to realize their philosophy. That's my recent observation. And oftentimes the question I ask the founder is that why didn't you get so the gravity of the standard? Why didn't that affect you? How could you what was the reason you could keep on your unique philosophy? That's oftentimes the question I ask. And often it goes deeper into their personal story. Why they founded the company, what what hurt him or her when they started the company. It's very personal. So maybe for the Sonic Garden, the software development company, the founder, he loves programming. He just enjoys program by himself. But what he saw in the Japanese software development area is that the way the standard business is done is putting that joy far from the programmers. So he didn't like that. He just wanted to himself and his team to feel joy throughout the programming. So that was the reason why his organization became so unique. He didn't start from an organization. His passion was the joy of programming. I think that kind of same thing is happening in a lot of companies.
What I love hearing there, Yuji, is you're talking about the leaders of that transformation in the organizational model and practices that they're adopting based on their inner philosophy, right? And that takes a journey on its own, right? As that leader to really go inwards and try to understand, what is my purpose? What am I called to do, to strive and have ultimately then that courage to be true to that inner philosophy and purpose that you as a leader have. Which would be interesting to hear on your journey. Have you come across organizations that have tried more progressive models and practices and it didn't work? And what were some of the learnings there, if you came across any?
Yes, and it's not included in these logos, but I think,
thank goodness, we don't want to advertise that now, do we?
so maybe so in my personal opinion, I don't think that all the organization needs to be progressive. If you have a pyramid of a hierarchical structure and the people there could be very happy working there, I think that's great. And the failures I saw was that when people started talking about Frederick Laloux's book in 2018 in Japan, and like the social norm that the organizations should be flat, or people should be more autonomous and so on. The people who in reality shouldn't fit the progressive way, I think in the TO context, that didn't fit to the founder's inner journey, inner expression. The organization should be more hierarchical, and that's fine if that's the way they want to realize their business or contribute to the society. I think that's great. You don't need to be pushed to create an progressive or TO or whatever organization. But I think people got attracted too much to that new myth. I think that was the failures happen a lot. That was like lying to their own integrity.
Yeah. And I love this question which came up because we spoke about that yesterday when we got to meet each other a little bit, right? And you just spoke about it when you were speaking with the CEOs, the inner transformation and journey that they are on. Now, there's folks here in the audience who would like to hear the transformation that you went through by going and trying to discover, the cultural differences and norms and how they influence the ways of working and business models. What did this journey do to you? How have you evolved?
For myself, my personal journey.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, this comes back to my brief career. So basically, it started when I was in a startup. I was working as a CEO. I was the number 2 in the organization. I did everything for managing the team. And in short, I shifted the organization into a very orange kind of paradigm. And I do still believe that was the best for the startup company to grow the business. But unfortunately, I didn't fit that. It wasn't my way. I hated controlling or being controlled by anyone. I didn't like that. But I really still believe that was the best for the company. And the startup is doing great. It's had like 200 members and it's growing. So I really respect their work. But I couldn't fit that, even though I shifted the organization into that model. And before that, it was, I won't say it was green or teal, but it was more like an individual autonomous people trying to do whatever they could do to put the company, take the next step. But I put it into a hierarchical orange way, and I couldn't suit that. And that was one of the reasons why I resigned from the job, because I didn't function well as a number 2 top management in a orange hierarchical organization. That was when I started to look for whatever alternatives that could be available in the world, that maintaining that autonomy and the cooperative way of the 10, 15 members, and still growing the business as expected from the shareholders or the market or the clients. I believe there must be a better way that I don't know. That was my starting point when I tried to figure out a better way. And I went all over, not of course in Japan and also in the world. And then I came to Frederick Lalouf's work and a lot of different Western knowledges, wisdoms. And then some was very suitable directly to whatever I saw in my organizations that I was facing. But some theories or models or frameworks, they in some way they didn't suit the reality I was facing. When the people or the founders who are trying their original ways of progressive or their original ways, the frameworks or the theories didn't suit to the situation. So that subtle differences was the place where questions emerged for me. What are the differences in this? Is there anything that we need to handle between these differences? And still, I don't have the answer. I've been working for this in 5, 6, 7 years now. And just trying to know more. And for me, I think this explains the best, but I'm here in Japan. I have the context or the culture of Japan, and we Japanese cultural people are the only ones who could take the next step in the Japanese context. No one else in the world can do this because we only know the reality of here in Japan. And that's the same to organizations or nations or whatever. The people here needs to create the next step by ourselves. So, and also creating next steps here in Japan, I truly believe that some way of this next step here in Japan could contribute in some way of the world or the humanity's next step. So I'm just taking my role here in Japan to take the next step in this culture. So that's why I'm doing all this journey since 2017 or something.
What stands out for me, Yuji, is that courage it takes, right, to recognize that you've created a system, as you described, for an organization that is beneficial for the organization, but doesn't necessarily match with your own philosophy, right? And then having that courage to admit that and taking those changes. What gave you that courage at that time?
Oh, thank you. But in reality, in short, I didn't recognize it before I did that. Like it was like 10 years ago when I shifted the organization into an orange way, I just thought that was best. And I think I'm still right. And after I started managing the organization, I think it took like 2 years, 1 or 2 years.
Mhm.
Troubles happened a lot. And going deeply into the accidents that happens, well, it seems that all the starting point is me. I'm the one who's not managing in the right manner.
Mhm.
And that's made a lot of confusion in the frontline members. And I just faced the reality. And that was the reason why I resigned from the job. I'm not suitable for that role. I don't have the capability or the suitable manner or the philosophy by myself to run that company in that way. So I don't think that was a courage, but that was the reality I faced.
Well, whatever drove you that way, I'm pretty glad it did, because otherwise we wouldn't be having this wonderful conversation. um, and another question, which I'm curious to hear your answer to, and it is: did you come across a innovative business model that you would say was so very Japanese that it could only have been born in Japan?
Maybe I can take a look at the models. Maybe not a direct answer to that question, but one, this is another topic I still want to work on. And one of these companies, this Ginza Akebono, is how do you say, a candies, okashi, I don't know how to say this in English.
Yeah, candy, sweets.
Snacks, snacks
Yeah.
and so on.
Okay.
This company is, I think, 80 years old. So
Wow.
wow. So it's the longest, of course, in these logos. But I went to meet the CEO. She's the fourth. Her grandparent were the founders, and she succeeded the company like 15 years ago and so on. From her viewpoint, 80 years is a very short term because the Japanese traditional snacks has like 300, 400 years. So in their context, it's very still a young company. And I think that's another aspect we hear in Japan. I've heard that Japan has the most companies who is over 100 years. No ever else in Japan, in the world. And I do understand that. And I think the oldest one was from 7th century or something. So it's like 1,000 years old or something. So there's a lot of, not business models, I'm not answering the question, but there might be some wisdom or not practical knowledge that has been succeeded throughout that centuries in different organizations. So the obvious progressive way of organizing is in these logos, majority is in the IT area or software or a very up-to-date business. But like this snack business or maybe the construction area or a very traditional ones might have a different knowledge or wisdom to manage a company in a very long timeline. So I think they might be an interesting topic I could go deeper in and share to the world too. I think that's some characteristics we have here in Japan.
And I love that. That would be my final question actually for you. Based on the journey you've done so far, Yuji, what's the big question that you're now moving towards to explore?
That's a big question.
And you've got 3 minutes to answer it.
Okay. Maybe I need to think for 2.5 minutes. Well, first thing, I'm still started the journey to go deeper into the real stories here in Japan. So I've only done 2025. So if I go to 100, I might see some things different. That might be a possibility. I'm just taking the first or second step right now. The next is that as long as being a very original way of organizing, we need to think about the business or the market or the finance or whatever related. Maybe should we work hybrid or flexible or fully in person or whatever? Might be a different topic.
Mhm.
So not only talking about the organization, maybe talking more about the whole activities in the entity or the community outside of the entity.
Mhm.
So maybe we need to redefine what are we managing? What are the outline of the entity we are talking about? Maybe we need to rethink or redefine what we are up to. I think that's might be the next step I could come after visiting 100 companies.
Interesting. And I actually find it so interesting that I will now post in the chat here the spatial chat, which is basically a different tool where Yuji and myself will be in a minute, and we will continue the conversation. And for example, Lawrence, I think that would be a great way. Lawrence, you wrote it was really interesting to listening into Yuji as you're discovering or on the journey in China doing similar work. I would be super interested to hear as well from you. So spatial chat will allow us to really go into the dialogue and exchange in the whole group. So with that said, I put it into the chat link here and just click on it and come over. In the meantime, Yuji, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge that you've discovered by visiting these different organizations. As I said, I find the topic of culture and the cultural diversity a super interesting one, having lived and experienced many different ones. And I love the lens that you take, which is what are the similarities and how can we learn from them versus, what's wrong or what's right or wrong. It is really more that inner curiosity. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening. Have a good night. Have a great day. Enjoy your lunch wherever in the world you may be. Thank you so much.